Hi everyone, I'm Willie from DesignCode, and welcome to my tutorial. Today, we will learn how to integrate 3D into your React website using Three.js. After learning the basics of web development, you probably want to learn more advanced technique to improve your website. Enhancing interaction is one of the ways to do this. The most common one includes animations, hovering on buttons, or swiping. So during the first part, we will learn all the basics of Three.js. So how to create a scene, how to make a shape, and applying some texture and colors. The second part is a little bit more advanced, which is animation. And then the third one is how to import your own 3D model into Three.js. Are you guys excited? So let's get started. So first, what is Three.js? It uses WebGL and JavaScript to create a 3D environment. You can render 3D shapes in a scene. On your page, we are basically stacking elements one on top of another. And using Three.js, we can render 3D objects. So let's say, for example, this one, which is one of my favorite website, GitHub, and it is using Three.js here to render this planet. So you can see that we can rotate it, and this is a 3D element. And another good example would be NASA. Here, you see that they are basically rendering a whole satellite. So to understand Three.js better, let's go to their website and select the editor. The whole structure works as follows. First, we need a canvas, which is our 3D scene. Here you can see that we have our scene. Then we need a geometry, which is like the shape, the object. Here we can add a box. Then on that box, we need to add some kind of material or texture. So let's change the color to, let's say, blue. But as you can see, the box is still black. And the fourth element is the lighting, because we need something to illuminate the scene. Let's add an ambient light. Then let's add a directional light. And now you can see that we have our 3D shape. For this project, I will be using Code Sandbox. I will leave the link to the template in the description below. We need 3 packages. The first one is Three.js. This is our JavaScript 3D library. The second one is 3Fiber. This one is a React renderer for Three.js. And the third one is 3Dre. This is a collection of helpers for Three.js. Basically, it's just pre-made functions in Code Sandbox. Let's add them here. So first is 3. Then we have React, 3Fiber, and React, 3Dre. Let's create a React 3Fiber scene with the canvas object. At the top, let's import the canvas from a React 3Fiber, and let's add it right after the text section. So now we have our scene. We need a geometry, some kind of object. So in your components, let's create a new file and let's make a box. So box.js. And here, let's import React from React. Then export default function box. And let's return a div for now. So in your app, let's import that box from the components folder and the box component. And inside your canvas, let's add the box. So here you see that the div is not part of the 3 namespace, which means that inside the canvas, a div cannot exist. So in your box, let's replace div by a mesh. And now it works. So the mesh is basically a class that represents polygon mesh objects. It consists of a geometry and a material. So inside the mesh, let's add our box. Here we are going to use the box buffer geometry. On the Three.js documentation, you can see that there's a list of multiple geometries that you can use. The most basic one is the box. Then you have a circle, a cone, you can use a cylinder, and so on. But for our example, we will be using a box. Then we're going to attach to the geometry. After the geometry, we need the material. So here I will be using the mesh Lambert material, and let's attach material to it. And with this one, we have another property for the color. So I will set it to blue. Similar to the geometry, you can go to the Three.js documentation and search for material. And here, there's a few ones. So if you use the basic one, it's a unicolor on all the shape. And then you can explore. Why I chose the Lambert material is because it is a non-shiny surface and we can apply a color. So back to the code. On the browser, you can see that we have our box, but it is very small and it is also black. So first, let's resize the canvas. In your app.js, we can go to the canvas, add a class name so we can refer to it from the wrapper, and I will call it canvas. So in here, I can use the selector canvas, and let's see what is the size of the canvas by adding a background red. So here you see that our canvas is pretty small. I want to add a height of 500 pixels. It won't change because you need to refresh the page. And now our canvas is bigger, so our geometry is bigger as well. Let's remove the background red. And to resize our geometry, we can go to the box, and in here, we can add an argument on the box buffer geometry, which is args. When you hover on this property, you can see that it takes a width, a height, and a depth, and other parameters. So to set the size of the box, we can set it like this. The box doesn't really feel like a 3D shape at the moment, so we can add some rotation. On the mesh, there's a rotation property that we can add. So let's do that. And similar to the arcs of the box buffer geometry, you can have 3 values in degrees. So here, let's add 90 degrees, 0 degrees, and 20. It finally looks like a 3D geometry. Next, let's add some lighting. On the app.js, inside of the canvas, we can add lightings. So a source of light. The first one is the ambient light, and we can set its intensity to, let's say, 0.5. And now we have the color. And to see the 3D effect, let's add a directional light. The directional light has a position, and let's set it to -2, 5, and 2. Then the intensity to 1. And now we can see clearly each edge of the cube. To this point, it looks pretty good. So let's move on to the interactions. The Dre collection has a function to rotate the geometry similarly to the GitHub ones. So let's do that. At the top, let's import a function from the Dre collection called orbit controls from React3Dre. This component, when you add it to the canvas, so orbit controls, will enable some controls on the shape. So if you hold it, and now we can kind of play with it in a 3D dimension. One of the problems that I see is that if you zoom out or zoom in, it breaks because it kind of like changing the position of the shape. So here there's a property called enable zoom, and let's set it to false. So refresh. And now we can play with it without breaking it. So now that we know how to add a color to our geometry, let's apply a texture instead. Here in online, you can download any kind of texture that you want. And let's import it in the project as a JPEG. So here I have an image called map.jpg, and I will be applying this texture to our cube. So to do so, we need the useLoader hook, which takes 2 arguments, a loader and an input. So at the top, let's import useLoader. And this is a method, well, this is a hook from the React 3 fiber. Then we need another function, which is the texture loader from 3. In the source file, loaders and texture loader. And then we need to import our texture, which is in the images file. So here, images, map.jpg. So in your function, let's call the hook. So constant color map is equal to the useLoader. And this hook takes 2 arguments, the loader and the input. So let's use the text loader and then our actual texture, which is the map. Instead of using the mesh Lambert material, let's remove that. We will be using the mesh mesh standard material. And this one has a property of map, and let's set it to the color map. And this is how you apply texture to your geometry. Let's refresh the page. And you see that we have a problem because we need a fallback. Basically what it means is that if our useLoader function hook is not able to fetch the material, it will break. So to fix this issue, we need to go to the app.js, and then at the top, let's import React from React. And from the React package, we need suspense. Basically, it needs a fallback in case the content cannot be retrieved. So in this case, we're using the suspense fallback. So let's wrap this inside of our box. So here, let's use the suspense component, which has a fallback, and let's set it to null. Then add your box inside. So now, if you refresh, it won't break anymore. The last material that I will show you is the normal material, and probably one of my favorite. So in the box, let's remove this mesh, and let's add the mesh normal material. Let's attach it to the material. And it's basically normal vectors into RGB colors. So if you move, it's going to change the colors depending on the lighting. We will work with another shape, and let's animate it. The next design is basically something that you can use as a background. On the React Three.js collection, if you scroll down, you see that there's a bunch of functions and components that we can use. So from cameras, controls, abstraction, shaders, modifiers, mask loaders, performance, shapes, and staging. Here we will be using the sphere and as well as the mesh distort material. So back to the project. In the components folder, let's create a new file and let's name it animated sphere.js. So here, let's import React. Then we need to import the sphere as well as the mesh distort material from React Three.js. So let's export default function, animated sphere. Return the sphere. So in our app here, let's copy paste the whole canvas right after, but let's change the box to the sphere one. So here at the top, let's import the sphere from the components file. And now we have a sphere. So here, let's add a few properties. So visible, similar to the box, we have the arcs. And this one, on the sphere, it's completely different. So the first argument is the radius, then the width segments, and the height segments. So first, let's set it to 1, 100, and 200. If we scroll, we have something like this. I want it a little bit bigger, so let's use a scale 2. And now, inside the sphere, we can use the component mesh distort material to animate it. So let's use the mesh distort material. And on this component, there's multiple properties that you can use. First, we can set the color. So the color will be a hex value, which is 83, 52, and FD, which is a purple. Then we need to attach to material. And now we can use multiple properties to basically change our geometry. So the first one is distort. You can set the distortion to a very high number, like 1, or what I prefer is something around 0.3. Then you can also change the speed. So you can set it to 1, which is fairly slow, or 2. And I think I will set it to 1.5, which is the middle ground. Then you can change the roughness. So if you set the roughness to 1, you can see that, I don't know if the light can, we see no lights. And then if you set this to 0, you see that it is reflecting our source of light. So this is how you do a animated blob with Three.js. The first one is more like learning the basics and experimenting. I feel like this component over here can be used as a background for a lot of websites. Lastly, let's talk about 3D models. We learned about Three.js, how it works, and the basic shapes. If you design your 3D models on another software like Blender or Cinema 4D, it's fairly simple to import that to Three.js. Or go to Sketchfab or any website for free 3D assets if you want to import an already made asset. So here, I will search for the iPhone 13 Pro. And you can see that you can buy some assets, but you can also see some free ones. So I will select the Apple iPhone 13 Pro Max. And here you can download 3D asset. I highly recommend to choose the GLTF format because it is very good for performance, so it won't slow down your website. And when this is done downloading, you will see some file with .gltf. Now that you have this file, we need to convert it into a GLTF 2.0. The 2.0 basically renders meshes, shadings, and animation differently. And this is why we need to go to the GLTF pipeline to install this command. So on your terminal, if you use npm, just install this command. And if you have the permission denied issue, just add sudo in front of it. Sudo means that you have to grant access to it. So just add your password. And now you have the command. When the command is done, we need to go to converting a GLTF to Draco GLTF. So first, let's access my desktop. And in my desktop, I will go into my iPhone folder, which is this one. And inside this one, let's run the gltf pipeline -i and then the name. So here I have scene.gltf. So this one, I will name it iPhone.gltf and then run your command. It shouldn't take long, and now you have a new gltf 2.0 file. Then you need to go to this GitHub repo, which is the gltf JSX, and it turns your gltf files into a JavaScript component. So in the same in the same folder, you can run this command. So the npx gltf JSX and your name of your gltf file. In our case, it's the iPhone.gltf. Then run it. When it's done, you will see that we have a iPhone.js file. When this is done, just drag the correct file in the correct folders. So the iPhone.gltf, drag this one in the publics folder. Then the iPhone.js in the components folder. So here, if we take a look at the iPhone.js, we can see that it is very similar. So the model structure is the same as the geometry that we have, which is just geometries and materials. All the mesh have a geometry and a material. So in our app.js, here, let's copy paste the canvas and change the sphere to the iPhone. And at the top over here, let's put it like this. And let's import the iPhone from the components file. And now you see a very small iPhone. So on the iPhone, here on the scale, you can change this value to, let's say, 500. And now you have a bigger iPhone. So this is the end of the tutorial. I hope that you like it, and I will see you on the next one.